Here to talk about this subject, joining me on set, Javier Manjarres, managing editor of the Shark Tank, and via Skype, Rabin-Havt, host of The Agenda and former advisor to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Javier and Ari, it is great to have you both here. And Ari, since you're kind enough to Skype in from Washington, to you first. In an interview with The New Yorker in January of this year, President Obama was asked about the gains ISIS was making then in Syria. Look at what he said in response. Quoting now, "The analogy we use around here sometimes, and I think it's accurate, is if a JV team puts on Lakers uniforms, that doesn't make them Kobe Bryant." Ari, a pretty flippant analogy. Does it point out how badly this president underestimated the powers of ISIS?
I think it points out how the press and how our foreign policy conversation has become one flippant analogy after another. You see coverage of these flippant analogies, but we miss broader substance and real complexity in a lot of these issues. And what gets highlighted is the flip. Was it a flippant comment? Yeah, but the problem is our entire foreign policy conversation breaks down to a flippant comment.
Well, we can perhaps make that indictment process wide because of the use of audio clips and sound bites. Javier, we want to be fair here, showing the situation really cuts both ways. Those on the left argue you can't lose a fight that you don't engage to begin with, but they point to the Bush administration as the root cause of the crisis. It is interesting now, however, Hillary Clinton has gotten back into this discussion, trying to distance herself from the president whom she served as Secretary of State. Here's what Mrs. Clinton had to say, quote, great nations don't need organizing principles, great nations need organizing principles, and don't do stupid stuff is not an organizing principle. Javier, that, of course, the admonishment of President Obama. Are we seeing Mrs. Clinton getting ready to position herself for the campaign yet to come in 2016 with that kind of comment?
Oh, I think we've seen that, but also she has to come to terms with the fact that she needs to come to American people and tell people where she was when all this in Benghazi happened, what she knew and when she knew it. Now, as far as blaming Bush, this is typical Democrat talking points. They just revert back to the old blame Bush doctrine. They have nothing more to add to it. We lost this fight when Obama quit engaging the enemy. When he started pulling troops out of Iraq, showed weakness. He continues to convey weakness around the country, and you see the uprise of ISIS, which I'm in agreement with Vice President Dick Cheney. They're bigger than Al-Qaeda ever was, and they're more of a threat.
Ari, this will be very strange. You may want to mark this. Let me actually cop a plea for the Democrats in this situation, and it comes this way. You do what's effective politically. If it's still polling well to blame George Bush, you guys are going to keep blaming Bush. To Vice President Cheney's point, is that going to subside, or do you think the numbers are still going to bear out this identification with these policies in Iraq to be at the feet of one George W. Bush? Ari?
You introed the segment saying Bush is a four-letter word to Democrats. Actually, no, because we want to keep saying it over and over and over and over again. And I think with regard to ISIS, look, ISIS was created out of our invasion of Iraq. That is the dawn of ISIS. So to completely absolve the Bush administration of any responsibility here for what's going on in Iraq right now completely ignores the history of that region and ignores how ISIS was created and where it came from.
We tend to think that midterm elections are decided on domestic policies, but as is always the case, these elections don't occur in a vacuum. We have this playing out on the world stage, and it could very well have an impact in the midterms. According to one pollster, the public's mood on these issues may actually work against both major parties. Let's take a look at this observation, quoting now, "With an everything is terrible mindset, I'm mostly thinking about how after several years of cantankerous and unproductive lawmaking in Washington, there are very few political figures or institutions who the public trusts anymore." That's the polling analyst for the Washington Post, Scott Clement. So we can take that into account, Javier. They're saying a pox on both houses. But when push comes to shove, voters who show up in the midterms are motivated voters. They're partisan voters. We take a look in North Carolina, Kay Hagan holding on to a lead, but she's underwater in terms of her approval rating. What's going to happen in states like North Carolina in these key Senate races, tying in what's going on internationally?
Well, first, Americans are war weary. We know this. They don't want any more boots on the ground in Iraq or anywhere else. But remember, foreign policy is a winning issue. It's always been historically for Republicans. Republicans can hone their message in on a strong foreign policy, strong military, strong presence around the world without having to sacrifice any more U.S. soldiers under Obama. I think it'll be, again, another winning issue for them moving into 2014 and again in 2016.
Ari, one thing about it, there have been years where Republicans thought they could take control of the U.S. Senate before, only to come up shorthanded. Your former boss, Harry Reid, remains the man with the power of scheduling legislation on the floor of the United States Senate as the majority leader. Knowing Harry Reid as you do, knowing some of these races across the country, where do you believe Democrats have the best chance to hang on to these very vulnerable Senate seats?
Well, take North Carolina, since you brought it up. Kay Hagan leads, and I think more important than national mood, national issues, is what's going on the ground in North Carolina. I think one of the reasons for Kay Hagan's lead is Reverend Barber down there has led this Moral Monday movement for a few years now, which has galvanized thousands upon thousands of people throughout the state, made them politically active, brought people into the process. And I think what you're seeing in North Carolina, despite Kay Hagan not being popular, is a product of a very motivated electorate on both sides that's actually benefiting Kay Hagan because of the work that Reverend Barber did related more to local issues within the state than any national issue.
Ari, you bring that up, and when I hear Moral Monday, being a native North Carolinian and being someone who's been around the block more than one time, I see that as a classic kind of Saul Alinsky operation. For whatever reason, they're trying to mobilize public opinion. We understand that. But Javier, it's not quite the moral position of authority these guys are dealing with there.
Right, look, this is a poll. It's early. Anything can happen in the next couple of days, couple of weeks. I think at the end of the day, Kay Hagan will lose. This is all going to come back around what's in the news. I think ISIS is going to continue to stay in the news. Foreign policy, again, foreign policy is a winning issue for Republicans. I think it'll work in their favor in North Carolina and other states.
Ari, another issue, the border. Your former boss the other week said the southern border is secure. Do you think he'd want to amend that in the wake of what has transpired, especially with the murder of the off-duty Border Patrol agent, allegedly by a pair of illegals last week?
No, I don't think he'll want to amend that. I think, look, everybody acknowledges we have a flawed immigration policy. And I think everybody across the board acknowledges we have significant immigration problems. Whether those problems begin and end at the border, I think, is a very real question. I think the point he was trying to make was our problems don't start or end at the border. That is a portion of what we have to deal with.
Javier, last word on that.
I disagree. Look, at the end of the day, border security and national security are one and the same. Harry Reid's comments are irresponsible, bottom line. He didn't know what he was talking about. He still doesn't know what he's talking about. He needs to retract it. I don't think he will, that statement. But again, the issue starts at the border, first and foremost.
Ari, we appreciate you Skyping in from Washington. Javier, good to have you here on set. Another great discussion. And we got the take of these two political pros. Now, what's your take at home on this? We'd love for you to get in touch with us via social media. Why don't you tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. There's also newsmaxtv.com/comment. And don't forget Facebook, y'all. You can get a hold of us, facebook.com/Newsmax. A variety of ways for you to weigh in with your opinions, your insight and analysis. A Newsmax Now update follows this time out.